good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, live from Israel, the Ethics of the Fathers, with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. His class has been going on and on and on. You know, I double-checked the other day because I've been uploading some new stuff to the International Noahide Network Roku station, and you know, it's been a couple years now, Rabbi Coffman, since we've been going at this. It's been over 2 years now, steady, and yeah, it's a joy to hear the ethics of the fathers coming out of the nation of Israel. I think this is the true source for wonderful ethics that we can put into practice. So, you know, Rabbi Kaufman's been preparing hard for us, so it's just a joy to be with him. So let's just jump right in. And Rabbi Kaufman, you're live on the air. So good to be with you. I heard your message earlier this week on Unorthodox. Excellent stuff. You keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate everything you share.
Pleasure to be here as usual. Now imagine we've been together for 2 years. You know what they say? They never had a fight. Because I always win. That's just it.
Well, we have fried the computer a couple of times.
It's always a pleasure to be here. We are still chapter 2, Mishnah 6, part 14. So we'll see if there's going to be a part 15. We are towards the end of the Mishnah. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up that the Mishnah says when we're talking about an impatient person that cannot teach, right? That's really been the theme over the last number of weeks. So we'll bring in a little bit of Kabbalah here. Even though you're going to say, what, you're going to teach Kabbalah to non-Jews? No, we're just going to mention one thing. In the name of Rabbi Chaim Vital, of blessed memory, Rabbi Chaim Vital, known as the most famous student, most likely, of his Rebbe, the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, of blessed memory, right? Major commentary on the Zohar, on Kabbalah, etc. And he says, now this is a pretty scary thing. And that is that every transgression, every single transgression makes the blemish in a certain part of the body.
Wow. Right?
That is going to be a scary proposition.
Sure is.
Anger blemishes the soul to the extent the rabbis tell us someone who's angry as if they transgress prohibition of idolatry. Therefore, God does not want his Torah at all. Now, anger, we mentioned, the Talmud says clear, anger is so bad. First of all, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos one day we'll get there, probably next century, right? Speaks about the idea you never ever speak to someone when they're angry, right? You have to let the anger dissipate, right? The anger has to go away before you can address them, right? Before they come back to their right mind,
right, so
to speak. Because the Talmud says the person can be so angry, even if they were hanging over the pit of hell. Right? In other words, they understand what's going to happen. They understand the pain they may feel, they may go through, whatever that is. In the end, what's going to be is the fact that they're not going to change. In other words, they're so rip-roaring mad, it doesn't really matter what's going to happen. The bottom line is the person is not going to, he's not going to worry about it.
No, they got a broken regulator on their emotions.
And we know that if a person's been angry, if we ourselves have been angry, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's justified, right? There is certainly anger that can be justified. But, a person gets angry, we know at that point it's just we're out of control, right? That's the whole point here. We're 100% out of control. When a person's out of control, they can't be reasoned with. Now, the person themselves, even if they get out of control, it's going to take them time to get back in control, which means that even if they know what they're doing is wrong, even if they know how bad anger is, and they know, what the power of it is, they can justify it, irrelevant, doesn't really matter. The point is that once a person's overcome by it, it is very, very hard to overcome that, right? In other words, once a person gets angry, you can't just turn on and off emotion.
Right. The
Right?
kettle's
That
whistling.
is something that's an impossibility.
Sure.
Now I can tell you from personal experience, from trying to do such a thing when I was younger, right? It doesn't work, right? In the end, it doesn't work. You might be able to fake it, right? In a certain way, you may be able to put up blocks, so you don't get, so someone can't hurt you, let's say emotionally, etc. So in theory, a person may think, you know what, I can turn emotion into silly putty, right? In other words, you can push off certain things by pushing them off. What does it do? So you'll say, I'll hide behind something else, right? In other words, I'll use this emotion when I need it. I'll push it aside when I don't need it, and I'll take some other emotion. Right now, that is really an impossibility.
Right.
The reason is because, again, we're not silly putty over here. We don't have the ability just to turn on and off emotion. Right? It could be that a person can catch themselves and, they could all of a sudden like blow up and they say, why am I doing this? It's my evil inclination and I'm going to work like a dog to fight against it. Not so easy, right? I'm not going to say it's impossible, right? But if a person psych themselves up, it can help them get out of that mood. Now, problem is we get cooked up enough. It's, again, I'm not going to say it's impossible. But once a person is in the throw of that inclination, right, whatever it is, that inclination can go viral, right? Meaning that it can drive you nuts and it can cause all kinds of problems. When the fact is, that one thing we have to acknowledge and again, there are a lot of things, that I learned, when I became religious and started going through different texts and Musar and all kinds of things, if I would have had a certain level of knowledge, years earlier, would have saved from a lot of aggravation, tremendous amount of aggravation, right? And one of them is this, because, knowing the right thing to do is already, 90% of what we're up against. Most people don't know what to do. They have no idea what to do. They just react, knee-jerk reactions. But the point is a person always has to be in control. Mm-hmm. Now, when a person goes out of control, and let's say, we're not even going to say a person gets angry.
Loses it. Totally.
Someone goes after a certain desire. They go after some desire, whatever it is. They're caught up in the moment. I'll give an example. I had a friend of mine who was trying to keep kosher, never kept kosher in his life, was trying to keep kosher. Obviously, this is a Jew, not a non-Jew, right? Non-Jew doesn't apply in general. But the point is, he wanted to keep kosher, and he says, I have this pepperoni urge. I have this trafe urge. Right? So people say, nah, just, trying to overcome it. It's like, it's something I have to do. Like it was burning inside him, right? We all have that. Whatever, you fill in the desire. Maybe it's a good desire. God forbid, maybe it's something bad. But sometimes we get all cooked up and we get all cooked up and we get all cooked up. And what happens? We lose control, right? That's one of the reasons that a person may be punished for what they think, right? We've spoken about this before, that when a person thinks something, you're going to say, well, it doesn't really become part of them. Well, it depends. If they think about it enough times, then it's always there. It's always part of the psyche. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to manifest itself, right? But as I was learning something today, that, it's pretty clear by a person's desires, right? By their, let's say it's a bad desire, right? And when a person has a certain desire and they think about it and they think about it more, or they act on it, right? Let's say, even something permissible. Someone's married, they want to be with their wife, their spouse, etc. That's permissible. Now, the only thing is, you're not allowed to be with your spouse whenever you want, right? Even if your spouse is permissible, right? For Jews, there are laws that are guarding this. Now, what happens? What happens is that even if it's permissible, so you're not supposed to act on it all the time. If you're not supposed to act on it all the time, what happens? You daydream. You think about things, right? A person's human. It is the greatest urge that a person has, right? And what do the Christians say? It's evil. It's all evil. Don't act on it, whatever. It's all bad. We don't know if it's bad. If it's harnessed in the right way, it's a beautiful thing. If it's not harnessed in the right way, then what is it? Then you're acting like an animal, right? So you're going to say, well, don't we do many things like animals? True, right? There's no question. The question is, we know better, or we should know better. Now, someone will say, you know what? I got a problem with this. If it's permissible, if it's 100% permissible, what's the issue, right? We'll just quote something here because people always say I never quote anything, right? I never quote any sources, right?
You've been doing great of late.
The Torah tells me in the book of Leviticus, Parshas Kedoshim, right? In Parshas Kedoshim, chapter 19. Chapter 19, the Torah tells us a lot of ethics in this chapter. I can imagine when I get to it on my, when I speak about the book of Leviticus, we're still holding by chapter 14. We're going to finish, hopefully, tomorrow, chapter 14. But to get to chapter 19, it's going to take a while, right? And even when we get to chapter 19, right, it's all about ethics. A lot of it has to do with ethics, dealing with others, loving your fellow, as yourself, etc. So chapter 19, verse 1, we want to get to verse 2. But God spoke to Moshe, saying, verse 1, speak to the entire assembly, the children of Israel, say to them, you shall be holy, for holy am I, Hashem your God. Well, that's beautiful. What does that mean? What does it mean to be holy? Right? We mentioned this before. What does the Torah tell me? Or what do the commentaries tell us? There's a difference of opinion here between Rashi and the Ramban. Comes along Rashi and he says, what does it mean to be holy? It means be careful when it comes to immorality. Right? Be careful when it comes to immorality. In other words, there are people you're not allowed to be with. Right? Just because the person's married. Right? Woman or guy, it doesn't really matter. Right? A person's married. So they're going to say, I never have a desire, or not me. Someone else never has a desire for for someone of the opposite sex, even if they're married. Well, that doesn't exist. I mean, unless you're like a perfect human being, which none of us are, right? How can it be someone, may not have a desire for someone else? It's, if everything's going right in the marriage, all things being equal, a person should never have a desire for someone else, right? And again, all things being equal. So it comes on Rashi and says, first thing is, we're talking about immorality, right? A person has to be careful who they're not allowed to be with, right? That's clear. It comes on the Ramban. The Ramban's a little more difficult. Why do I say it's difficult? Because the Ramban says, there are plenty of things that are permissible. What's permissible? Eating, right? I'm allowed to eat as long as it, for a Jew, as long as it's kosher. Okay. Now, does that mean I'm allowed to be a glutton? Doesn't mean that, right? I'm not allowed to be a glutton. I'm not allowed to be ravenous. I'm not allowed to just eat, put on weight, all these things. I'm allowed to eat, though. Problem is, I can't abuse it. Right? It says the Ramban further, you're allowed to drink. Right? You want to drink liquor, you're allowed to. Right? Comes Friday night, Shabbos day, you make kiddush. A lot of people make kiddush on wine. Right? The obligation really should make on wine. You don't like wine. Okay, you can make on grape juice. Not everyone holds you can make on grape juice, but you're allowed. You're allowed to make on grape juice. Right? So let's say, a person makes on wine. We know on Passover you drink 4 cups of wine. Right? Even if it's not such a big amount. Regardless, there are a lot of things within Judaism where you're going to drink. Or you could drink. Now, what happens if someone abuses alcohol? You're going to say, come on. Judaism makes it so easy for someone who abuses alcohol. Okay. But Judaism also says you're not allowed to be an alcoholic. Right? We understand by Nadav and Avihu.
Yeah.
Nadav and Avihu. Right? What do they die from? I mean, different opinions. Right? Simple explanations, one of two things. It's either they brought a strange fire. Right? They brought a strange fire they weren't allowed to bring. They thought it was an auspicious time. Right? They're putting up the Mishkan. The tabernacle was being built, being finished. So they thought it was an unbelievable auspicious time. So they were in the Holy of Holies, which you're allowed to only go in for the high priest once a year. Right? That's on Yom Kippur. So they thought such an auspicious time, let's bring this. Right? Let's bring this, this incense, this strange fire, whatever. Now, they had the right intention. The only problem is God said you're not allowed to do it, right? But there's another thing. What did they do before they served? Right, the Kohanim were the priests that served, right, in the tabernacle, in the temple, etc. So, what does the Torah tell me? You're not allowed to drink, right? You're not allowed to drink before you serve. Now, what happened? So they drank a little bit of wine before they served, liable for the death penalty. So then the Torah says later, any Kohen who serves, you're not allowed to drink. You're not allowed to drink wine. You're not allowed to drink liquor, right? Again, we're not even talking about a lot. Right? We're just talking about a small amount. So over here, okay, it's very hard to understand, at their level what they're punished for. But that's not the point. We don't want to necessarily digress. The point over here is what? The point is, you're going to tell me wine, liquor is permissible. Very good. Wine and liquor is permissible. So says the Ramban, that's great. You're not allowed to abuse it. You're not allowed to abuse anything, right? You have to use it obviously within reason. If it's permissible, fine, right? So again, people are going to say, I don't understand. Why do I have to watch myself? Why do I have to watch myself over here? Why do I have to be careful with my spouse? Now, for all women out there, they'll probably be very happy. They say, husband can't be with his wife like a chicken, right? We're going to keep this PG-13 for the Roku network that we're on, right? But you can't do that. There are certain times of the month, obviously, a husband can't be with his wife. Fine. But someone will argue, you know what? If it's permissible, it's permissible. And that's it. But something like that can get abused, right? Because, if it's only permissible a certain amount of time, you might as well try to make the most of it, right? Isn't that what we'd say? Come on, no limitation. Now, technically speaking, that should be okay. Because the Torah only says it's forbidden to draw close to her, right? When she gets her monthly cycle. Fine. We understand that. But again, logic. Let's try and think about this logically. Isn't it true? If person's permissible, what's the problem? Shouldn't be an issue. Comes along the Ramban and says, yeah, if it's permissible. Now, this is a different issue. It's really a different issue because the Ramban says if it's permissible, doesn't mean you're allowed to abuse it, right? You're not allowed to abuse it. But the question really becomes, I'm going to actually, maybe tomorrow, speak about this more in depth because it actually does come up. And the idea is even if the spouse is permissible, who says, every single day or twice a day or who knows what, person can be with the spouse. Right? Even if that's what the spouse wants, obviously it can't be done against her will. That's forbidden. Right? That everybody would agree that's forbidden. Right? But if they both agree, what's the problem? What should be the issue? And there is an issue. Right? There is an issue because the Torah over here says you have an obligation to be holy. An obligation to be holy means even if something's permissible, doesn't give me the right to abuse it. Right? Doesn't give me the right to indulge in it as much as I want. Now, says Mori Varebi, Arav Lagon Ramosh Stor Mochlita should be well. He brings down his commentary on Chumash and Tam V'das. And he says over there, not on this verse, but he brings it at the end of chapter 14 in the book of Leviticus. And he says at the beginning of chapter 15, and he says just because it's permissible doesn't mean every single second that's what I should be doing. Right? Or as many times as I can get in, before she becomes forbidden. Or whatever the case is. Right? Now, that being said, there's a gauge. There's a limit. But what do people not want to hear in this world? People don't want to hear that there are limitations. People do not want to hear this is a problem. They want to do whatever they want. And they'll justify maybe, to do whatever they want. Right? So someone recently said, comment, I haven't answered this comment, but I'm going to answer it now. Answer it in private as well. And that is like, what difference does it make? We're all good. We're all good people. We do this, we do that. Who cares? Who cares? So what are they saying? Torah doesn't matter. God gave the Torah, he didn't give the Torah. Doesn't matter. Right? I'm good in my heart, the cardiac Jew. right? But you tell somebody like that, you have limitations. You have to eat kosher. You have to wait 6 hours between meat and milk. Certain things you can't do, even if it's permissible. They don't want to hear that. They absolutely don't want to hear that. All they want to hear is, you have to agree what I do is okay. Live and let live. Right? As the English would say, that's rubbish. I can't do the R. Sorry. It's rubbish. That's rubbish. Why?
Like I can't do the in
right. Non-Jews have the hardest trouble doing the the German CH, right? They have to spit at you before they actually say it. Right? Well, let's not digress here. The point is, someone will say, come on, live and let live. But the Torah is not about live and let live. Right? And I use this argument, it's going to go nowhere. Probably a waste of time. Right? But why is it not going to go anywhere? Because I don't care. I said, did God speak at Mount Sinai or not? If he spoke at Mount Sinai, what's my obligation? You know what the response is? Who cares? Who cares? I'm a good person. What do I care if God spoke or not?
What's that standard based on?
Well, are there repercussions for what I do? Is there right and wrong? Right? They're going to say, well, right and wrong is relative. Oh, really? How is it relative? The Noahide laws, one of the Noahide laws we mentioned a number of times, don't kill. Right? So they're going to say, I never killed. Who did I ever kill? Oh, remember when you told the doctor to pull the plug on your aunt? Whatever. Oh, that's different. That's mercy. That's mercy. Yeah, you have a right. Okay, so we can have a discussion. We can have a discussion because that's not so clear cut, right? Seemingly mercy killing is forbidden, right? Pretty clear, it's forbidden, right? Actually, I might speak about that. I do Tanakh talk this week about end of life issues, right? It's going to be whatever. It should be a hot topic this week. And so in general, a person's going to say, for goodness sakes, I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to be my spouse, right? You're right, right? Let's say that's true. But who says you're allowed to be whenever you want? Who says? I mean, I'll take it even to a further extreme, right? I'll take it to a further extreme. To non-Jews. Does this apply to non-Jews? Shouldn't apply to non-Jews. There are no marital laws by a non-Jew, right? No family purity laws by a non-Jew. It would make sense, certainly for the wife. It would certainly make sense, but in general really doesn't apply. So I saw something where, there's somebody, they're older. I think this woman's in her 70s. Her husband, I don't know, probably is about 80. They're both on hormones, right? They're both taking hormones. Why? They're taking, I guess in a safe way, but they're taking hormones in order to be with each other as much as they can. Now, obviously, over 70, she's not getting her cycle anymore. Shouldn't be getting her cycle anymore, right? But the whole thing is that they want to be permissible as much as possible. They want to be, they want to do whatever. Again, we're going to keep this clean. They want to do whatever, as many times as possible. That's what you're living for. You're an animal. You're an absolute animal. You're a beast. Just because it's permitted. I mean, this goes further. Because what are they doing? They're actually taking hormones. Why? Because obviously they're getting older. It's harder, different things, whatever it is. But you're actually doing something to alter the body to a certain extent. And now, once you alter the body, what are you saying? I want to be young forever. Fame! I'm going to live forever. Forget it. You're in your 70s, right? You're in your mid-70s, right? This guy is 80 or his early 80s. I'm not saying can't be attracted to each other. They can't be together. But if that's the only thing that you're living for, and this person made it pretty clear, they enjoy it. So why shouldn't they? What's wrong with it, right? The same question I got earlier. What's wrong with all this? If it's permissible, then let it be permissible, and don't tell me what to do, right? That was the argument. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want. It doesn't matter. You tell me the Torah is true, it's not true. It's irrelevant to me. Why is it irrelevant? Because they don't want to be told what to do. Because if they're told what to do, as we mentioned many times, that there's the right way and the wrong way, they're toast. And they know their whole life has been a sham, right? But if you're intellectually honest. But most people aren't intellectually honest. So they'll throw this as a smokescreen. Fine. So the point is, you're not going to abuse things, even if they are permissible, right? This is something we absolutely have to be careful for. Because, we might get caught up in that mentality. As my Rebbe says, you might get caught up in that. Oh, so what? Well, what's the downside? So if it's permissible, I don't have an issue. We shouldn't have an issue. So what's the downside of being together? The downside is that a person has to realize that since you're doing things so often, you're going to have, your thoughts going to run crazy. So therefore, what's going to happen? So even now, let's say, your wife, your spouse is not permissible. If they're not permissible, what's the person going to be doing? Fantasizing, right? Totally fantasizing. And that's forbidden, right? If she's permissible, might be one thing, but if a person concentrates on that, it's forbidden because you're not allowed to go after your heart. You're not allowed to go after your eyes, right? So therefore, now what did a person do? They fed their desire so much, and this is a pretty crucial point here, in that a person fed their desire so much, very hard to break it. You take someone. You take a Jew's got to fast, right? Even a minor fast day, sun up to sundown. Not talking about Yom Kippur or the 9th of Av, which is 25 hours, right? Now imagine most people drink coffee. If I drink coffee, I kill people in general, right? So even though the tea I'm drinking, so might have some caffeine in it, but it's certainly not as potent as coffee. Regardless, what happens when a person has to fast? When a person has to fast, they can't eat or they can't drink, they get headaches. Right? We all, even if a person doesn't drink coffee, they get headaches. But someone who drinks coffee is worse. Right? It's worse. In other words, some people will say that you have to get off coffee for like 3-4 days before, because if not, you'll suffer. You'll suffer through the fast because the body feels like it needs it. The body feels it needs the caffeine. You don't give it the caffeine, I always say to someone who drinks 3-4 cups of coffee more probably a day. So on a fast day, I'll go like this. I'll go like the tremor, the tremor in the hand. And he's like, yeah, you're right. But it's what people do. So once something like that becomes addictive, and there are many things, right? Cigarettes, same thing. They put in, nicotine, right, to make it addictive. So it's very much harder to fight because now it's in your system. So you say, so a person may say, any of these other things, I don't know how many people are going to make this claim, but some of these other things, yeah, I could stop tomorrow. I could really start tomorrow. Now, I'm not sure so many people would say that. You take someone who's, has been a dire sports fan, for 30 years.
CFL.
For the CFL, I don't know
anyone's
a dire sports fan for that. But even so, someone who's been a dire sports fan for years, and you tell them cold turkey, you have to shut off, you can't watch anything. Can't look at anything, any sport, nothing, right, for a certain amount of time. Most people won't be able to do it. They won't, just the urge. If you tell somebody you can't do something, then there's a lot more difficult. Why? Because if they watch it, they don't watch it, no big deal. But once you tell them you can't do this, it's like a fast day. Some people don't eat till midday. Later they're busy, going here, going there. They don't have time. They're busy with all kinds of other things. All of a sudden, there's a fast day. By 8:30, they're like, I'm starving. I need to eat something. I need to drink. Why? During the rest of the week, they're running around. They eat, they don't eat. They eat better, they don't eat better, whatever. It doesn't matter. But since it's already permissible for them to eat or drink, it's no big deal, no matter when they do it. In this case, you tell them you can't do it. So what's the mentality? The mentality is, even if you wouldn't eat till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? That's when you normally eat, or you didn't have time, or whatever the case is, what's going to happen? 8 o'clock in the morning, you're starving, right? It's a psychological type of thing, right? So when it becomes part of us, when something like that becomes part of us, and a person's going to say, well, if it's part of me and it's part of my psyche, it's a lot harder to get out. It's true, right? That is definitely true. But you know what? A lot of things we do to ourselves. Meaning, we do something wrong, okay, we'll repent on it, we'll feel bad about it. Hopefully, we'll get atonement for it. And then what happens? You get the urge to do it again. And then, then once you've done it a few times, then it already becomes like your nature. So a person could claim against God. They say, listen, you gave us, you wired us in a certain way. Okay, right? We've spoken about this before as well. Then you wired us in a certain way. So if you wired us in a certain way, if I act on it, then why am I going to get punished? There's no reason for me to get punished. Because you made me this way. Fine. If it's something I did to myself, different issue. Now I did it to myself. But if, let's say, we have certain dispositions, which we all do. Some people, have a harder time with anger. Some people have an easier time. Some people have, a harder time, let's say, giving charity or other things. Whatever it is, we're wired a certain way. So a person could answer to God and say, listen, you made me this way. This is what you did. What do you want from me if I act on it? Right? So if I was playing God, my George Burns glasses and my funny mustache, what would I say as God? I would say, okay, you're right. I gave you a certain disposition. Now, did I tell you to act on it? Did I tell you to do this? I didn't tell you to do this. No, but I have a certain disposition, right? Or, a doctor once told me many years ago, for homosexuals, there's a gene. There's a homosexual gene, right? The Torah says it's forbidden. The Torah says you only cling to your spouse, to your wife. Doesn't say you cling to another man. It's forbidden, right? It's an unnatural desire for many reasons. Doesn't matter. Point is, a person said, this doctor said, you know what? They pinpointed a gene. So let's say they have, right? This is my argument. So let's say they have. So what? That means they're more susceptible. But you could also have an anger gene, a miser gene, a drinking too much gene. You can say, I'm wired this way. This is what you did to me. You know what we call that? We call that, for your CFL, we call that a third and long. That's called a punt, right? In other words, God is going to say, okay, you have certain things that, you're wired in a certain way. So you have a certain disposition. By having that disposition, did I give you the right to act on it? I didn't tell you to act on it, right? So we're not going to be able to use that argument. It's a losing argument, because God could also say, listen, you acted on these things. I didn't wire you that way. You did it. You did it to yourself. So we don't have any excuse if we did it to ourselves. But we may have a good excuse if God did it to us. But that's all it is an excuse. Because people say, what do you want? I grew up in this type of home. I grew up in a messed up home. Right? Who had a perfect time growing up? Who had a perfect childhood? Nobody. Everyone's had issues. Some more, some less. Right? It's not easy. Right? We're not in charge of our socioeconomic situation. As the Mishnah later says, Pirkei Avos, what does it say? You're born against your will, you die against your will. Right? In parentheses, you still have to live. But see, what happens is we make excuses. We absolutely make excuses. Hey, my parents did this. My parents did that. This happened. That happened. Okay. Right? You have to know how to deal with it. And if you can't deal with it, you have to get help. I can tell you my own personal experience that, when I got to yeshiva and I started learning, and I started devouring books of Musar, of ethics, Jewish philosophy, within a short amount of time, it changes. Certainly so many different struggles I went through, and I fought through and I suffered through, they got answered in 35 seconds. Wow. Because the Torah is clear. Torah is clear what's permissible, what's not permissible, and what people can do. God forbid to a person, because we're the only species that can affect others. As the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, animals don't affect anything. Doesn't matter if, God forbid, animals kill people. God's just using them as a weapon. It's a messenger, so maybe a nasty messenger. Whatever the case is. But we go through life. I read an article earlier. I always say that this is a Teflon generation. Right? It's a very, very weak generation. Even a person grows up religious, it's like any little thing happens to a person, they, oh, that's it, I'm done. I'm done with God, I'm done with religion. They're ready to give things up, relatively quickly. So saw someone write, so maybe I should actually change the language. It was actually very funny. to a certain extent. He said, we live in a tissue generation, not a Teflon. Teflon's stronger, right? Seemingly stronger. Tissue, right? What does it do to destroy a tissue? Not very much. It means we're very weak. We have very low self-esteem, right? And a lot of times we have to build ourselves up, as well as getting other people to build us up a little bit, and not that we should have a big ego, walking around with our heads up saying that I'm better than you and blah, blah, blah. It's not about that, right? Gaiva is forbidden. Being conceited, obviously forbidden, but you have to have a certain level of self-esteem. But what happens in life, right? Someone's going to say, come on, Rabbi, don't people get beaten down in life? Yes. They get destroyed. Many different ways. People get bullied. People get made fun of. People, all kinds of things that make a person's self-esteem be about zero. Now, the question is, okay, if a person, the problem is psychologically, if a person hears enough negative things about themselves, what are they going to say? That's who I am, right? They're going to act out what other people say, right? You know what they say? Someone's born as a middle child. We all know, quote unquote, middle child syndrome, right? They're not the oldest, not the youngest, right? Obviously somewhere in the middle, and they get, they have certain responsibility. Not as much as the older sibling, certainly more than the younger one. Whatever they're squeezed, why can't you be like your older sibling, your older brother, or why are you acting like your younger sister, or whatever it is, right? It's like almost you can never do anything right. So when a person hears that enough times, what are they going to do? Oh, you don't think I'm good enough? I'm going to act out, right? I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to act out what people say. Now I'm going to say, come on, people are fragile, people are young. Etc. But I'm saying that at a certain point, if we're taught from a very young age what, appropriate speech, appropriate action, other things, you'll say, well, don't secular kids get that? To a certain extent. They're told, you shouldn't be doing this, be careful with that. Parents obviously have to give certain guidelines. Today, in general, certainly in the secular world, parents are afraid to discipline. They'll give them whatever they want if they can. But kids need discipline. Someone told me a while ago that, they have younger kids, or now probably almost teenage kids, and, they have the internet in the house for whatever reason, and it's not filtered. So I'm like, how can you not filter it? Like, no, I usually see what they're doing, and blah, 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 whatever. I was like, you're playing with the time bomb, right? Probably one of the single, certainly in the Orthodox community, right? It's a very serious thing with technology, and, you need technology. Everyone needs, to a certain extent, certainly for work, for business, etc. Having the house, different issue, but, maybe a person needs it in the house also to work, etc. But it's a very tempting thing. Very, very tempting thing. Addiction doesn't just mean about drugs. It doesn't mean, abusing drugs or alcohol, other things. Addiction can also be video games. And I see all the time people playing this game, playing that game, playing the other thing. When I was growing up, biggest thing was like Donkey Kong and Asteroids, right? You probably remember. Pac-Man. Well, this Pac-Man was later.
Football, ColecoVision.
Yeah. Or I had, they had before, after Atari, they had Intellivision, which was much better than Atari, whatever. But these things, you can play for hours, just wasting your mind. Not to mention other things, right? Whether it's sports, whether it's entertainment. The problem is, as enjoyable as it is, right? What does it do? It takes away a person from Torah, right? In other words, what would you rather do? Try and break your head and learn something. Learn something's not going to be so easy. Or watch an action movie, right? It seems pretty simple, I would think, but that means we have to change our mentality. We have to change our mentality because, even if the prohibition is negligent, let's say, right? Let's say it's not a major prohibition. We saw by this week's Parsha, beginning of Parsha Zekev, talks about the fact that a person can trample on simple quote-unquote mitzvahs, Right? Now, there is no such thing as the simple mitzvah. The Torah doesn't tell me, the Torah will tell me sometimes what are the repercussions of certain things that I do. The Torah will tell me, do this, don't do that, etc. But we're not given, majority of the time, what the reward we get and what the repercussions are.
Right.
Now, something, let's say a small mitzvah. We don't, that maybe the reward's not as great. Why does the Torah not tell me what the reward is for any mitzvah in general? Because if I know there's a scale, and I know one mitzvah is worth 100 points, another mitzvah is worth 2, guess what? I'm going to do the mitzvah with 100 points. Going to get a lot more points, right? So the other ones, okay, I do them, I get extra credit, I get a few points here, a few points there, they'll add up after a while, right? But we have to understand there are, myriads and myriads of depths in any mitzvah. Even if we say, oh, I understand it, and this, that, we don't understand to the depth of what it is. So my Rebbe gave a good example. He gave a very good parable. Parable was like, you have a space shuttle, right? You have a rocket that goes up. Now, the rocket or the space shuttle has all kinds of components, right? It's got this attached to it, it's got that attached to it, all kinds, foam and screws and whatever. So he said, imagine one screw. One screw comes out.
Oh, yeah, blows up.
Right? In the bigger scheme of things, you say it's not a big deal. But someone told me one of the challengers that went down, I think there was a problem with one of the tiles, I think, came off, or there was foam or something, and that destroyed the whole thing. Right? So now you think about it, come on, one little screw. What's the big deal? One little screw. Yeah, one little screw when you're in a tin can. When you're in a tin can, you come in the Earth's atmosphere, one little screw, this thing comes flying off. Well, guess what? Repeat after me. Iskadav v'Iskadash. That's the mourner's prayer. It's over. Right? Because then when something else, that gets exposed, other things get exposed. In my language, poof, that's what happens. Right? So it's a very, very powerful message. You're going to say, come on, this screw doesn't do anything. One screw. You really think it's going to have that kind of power? It's insignificant, right? It costs you a few pennies for the screw. You're right. But if that screw in a certain place comes out, that's the difference between life and death. So the parable was, okay, look at the Torah. You're going to say, some of these mitzvahs may look insignificant. They may look small compared to other mitzvahs. Again, in our eyes. So, what's the answer? The answer is there's unbelievable depth to every mitzvah. Even a positive command, Rabbeinu Yonah says in the gates of repentance. Rabbeinu Yonah says when it comes to a positive command, let's say, God forbid, tomorrow a Jew doesn't put on tefillin. Right? Whatever. It's not under onus and he's not sick. Whatever, he didn't go. He didn't go to synagogue, he didn't put them on in the house. Sundown comes, he didn't do it. He didn't do the mitzvah. Rabbeinu Yonah says, there's no mitzvah, there's no positive command in the Torah that's not dependent on resurrection of the dead. In other words, every little thing we do, or God forbid don't do, there are repercussions. And there could be serious repercussions. Whether we see them now or we're going to have to wait, God forbid, until the next world or however it's going to be. Everything we do is significant. We've mentioned many times before that Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, famous student of the Vilna Gaon, says in Nefesh Chaim, says in the the Soul of Life, where he brings down, which most people don't learn in the very beginning, or let's say the first couple of gates, because a lot of it has to do with Kabbalah. But what does he say? He says, don't think for 1 second what you do doesn't matter. Right? Well, what's one example he gives? Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve eat from the tree. The tree is considered, according to Kabbalah, with all the spiritual worlds inside, messed up all the spiritual world. But even without all that, what did it do? Brought death to the world. God gave one commandment. They blew it. God throws them out of the garden. All right, everyone out of the pool. Right? Throws them out of the garden. So now, you're going to say, wow, that was a pretty significant thing. But it was one action. It was one action. So you're going to say, okay, when somebody does something, sometimes It can be more severe. Sometimes it can be less severe. Bringing death into the world is not a Jewish concept. Never should have been in this world. But there are repercussions, right? There are repercussions. That's what happened. So a person can't say, oh, really? What I do doesn't really, what I do doesn't matter. If what I do doesn't matter, right? The Rambam says in the beginning of the 13 principles of faith, the Rambam says God is absolute, right? God doesn't change. God is not fickle, right? Later in the 13 principles, he says God has the ability to give reward and punishment. Now, if that is not, God forbid, not the case, then why would we serve anything? Why would we serve anything? If it's not absolute, then I can do what I want. Now, if someone comes along and they would say, well, I don't believe in this type of God, and I feel I can do what I want, and I can pick and choose, and blah, blah, blah. So why, if these things didn't happen, or they're termed as a myth, or whatever, like this conservative rabbi 20 years ago, gets up on the seventh day of Passover and he says, the exodus from Egypt didn't happen. So why do we eat matzah? Torah tells me, this is what you're going to answer to your son on that day, right? On the 15th of Nisan. Meaning you have to tell him the story of the exodus. Well, no, we ripped that out. Didn't happen. Right? You don't have to eat maror, no bitter herbs, as the Torah tells me. Right? No paschal offering, nothing. Didn't happen. Didn't exist. So then people say, but the majority of people today, majority of Jews make a Passover Seder. Now, if they make a Passover Seder and they don't really believe in the Exodus, why are they doing it? Because it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. So that's great. There's only one problem. Culture does not reproduce. Culture does not, is not a guarantee at all.
No.
If the Jewish people are going to survive. The only way the Jewish people survive is through what? It's through Torah. It's through mitzvahs. We see that whatever they do otherwise, they're punished for. Because they're giving God lip service. It's not like a 5-year option to renew. I feel like doing it. I don't feel like doing it. Bottom line is that if it doesn't exist and it didn't happen, you say I'm a cultural Jew. What does that mean? Right? That means I do things when I want to do them, and I'll do them the way I want to do it. That does not disprove the Torah, we mentioned many times. Doesn't show that the Torah is not true. It just shows, as we said before, so you never know the connection there. It just shows you going after your own desires. That's what you're doing. You're convincing yourself, well, I can never be like you, so I'm going to do what I want. Okay, but what's the end result? What is the end result? You may be very Jewish. What about your kids? You're going to tell your kids, okay, you can do whatever you want. You can tell them that. How Jewish are they really going to be? Probably not so Jewish. They'll say they're more cultural. Very good. So what if they're more cultural? What does that mean for Judaism down the line? Well, they'll say, it doesn't really matter. Judaism survives, doesn't survive. What does the Bible say? I don't care what the Bible says. Right? So, you're dealing with most people not holding by anything, and they're just going after their base desires. That's it. Right? So now they're not going to come back and say, well, why do you think what you do is true? Oh, that's a whole different thing. A lot of proofs. You want to hear them? No. Not interested. I want to do whatever I want to do. Desire kills. Desire kills over here. That's what we're going to see later, right? In the next century. We're going to see desire, honor, and jealousy. Destroys a person. The Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, where do we know jealousy? Jealousy by Korah. Destroyed him, literally. Right? The commentaries say. Now, desires, the problem is, as we said before, if something is permissible, it can be abused. Now, if it's something forbidden, what do you think? Person's going to say eating pork, it tastes terrible. Anyone who ate pork probably don't think it tastes that terrible. What are we supposed to say? Probably tastes pretty good. But God says I can't eat it. Right? My Father in heaven says I can't eat it. Right? So, we have to curb our desires. We're not saying we're living an aesthetic life. Right? We're not saying everything in the world is evil. and everything is bad and blah, 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 right? We have to know how to use it, right? This is what the Torah is telling me. The Torah is telling me, Kedoshim to you have to be holy, Leviticus chapter 19. Says the Ramban over there, I have to control my thoughts. I have to control my desires, not just forbidden desires, like Rashi says, not just forbidden immoral desires or whatever it is. He's telling you you have to work on the desires that are permissible, because you can't just do what you want. Come on, don't you remember that song? Can't always get what I want. Can't. You're not allowed to.
Rolling Stones?
Yeah, could be, right? So you can Google it if you want. But the idea is, just because it's permissible, and this is where some people are going to get lost, just because it's permissible doesn't mean I should do it. Because
you got to do self-assessment
the more you gain by that, the more you're going to lose. Why are you going to lose? Because even if it's permissible for me now, and you're going to act on it as much as you want, when it's not permissible, your thoughts are going to go crazy. According to that. So how do you suppress that? That's really hard. It's like any desire. You gave into it so much that what happens? It becomes second nature. Then when I don't have it, then I'll do it, then, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll act on it, and, as my Rebbe says, that's going to be worse. That is going to be a lot worse, because since this is one of the greatest desires God gave, right? One of the greatest urges, that God gave. If you don't harness it right, you'll abuse it, right? You will certainly abuse it. So God said there's a limit. Now, right? Someone's going to ask, I'm sure, hey, does this apply to Noahites? So really, it doesn't. Really, they can be with their spouse whenever they want, right? Not an issue, in general.
But they can't be
The
disrespectful.
point is, though, as we mentioned,
sure.
Say again.
You're saying that Noahites, can do that, but if they're being disrespectful,
disrespectful is something else. I'm saying, even if they would both agree, right? So I did a whole show on Tanakh Talk on about the Noahide laws, speaking about moral imperatives.
Right.
Now, forget about women here, because women will say this is a great thing, but as guys won't think it's such a great thing. But as, in general, I'm not saying they have to, separate for 2 weeks, but in general, isn't it good to treat a spouse, we'll keep this clean, not like a piece of flesh? What do you do when you can't be with them? You just don't speak to them. You put them in a box. You hide them, till they come back to themselves, whatever. I mean, you can't do that. Right, that's the whole point.
Shower, yeah.
Is you have things to talk about. You do other things. I get it's it's high level, being intimate, this and that, fine, but it has to be harnessed. It has to be used in the right way. And if it's not used in the right way, again, even if both agree. So I would say for a Noahide, no, it's not forbidden. It's really not forbidden, but morally speaking, as a moral imperative, to act on it whenever you want, it's probably not a good thing. Right? It's probably not a good thing for the marriage. Even, again, if a husband and wife would agree. Right? So the Ramban, that's why I mentioned in the beginning, the Ramban over here is a little bit hard. Right? It's a little bit hard because most people are going to say, first thing they're going to say is, but she's permissible to me. And she agrees. Right? She's willing. So, everything's great. So what's the problem? The problem is we have to have self-control. Mm-hmm. We have to work on self-control.
Excess
breeds. The whole point of what we're doing in this world to be close to God is to do what God says, right? What does the Ramchal say in his introduction? It says in Derech Hashem, he says also in Path of the Just, the whole purpose is to lisaneg al Hashem, to enjoy God's goodness, to enjoy God's bounty, right? Now, how am I supposed to do that? Well, isn't it a good thing? God gave us a book. He gave it to Moshe, passed it down to us, right? He gave us things to do, things that are permissible, things that are forbidden. But see, a four-letter word in this world is never, ever, ever say to someone, you can't do this. Or you can't, I have rights. You can't tell me. I have rights. Okay. So what if you have rights? Is what I'm doing right now, is it right? Is it good? Right? What are your
Is
definitions?
it needed? Yeah.
Don't tell me, oh, I'm a good person and, this and that. I can think of 100 things, probably more, right? At the top of my head, that would say maybe you're not so good. Now, how do you define goodness, right? We did this on Tanakh Talk also. On a moral level, the question was, how can you say murder is always forbidden, right? At all times. On a moral level. So there were 9 different aspects of that moral level we knocked out. We knocked out for different reasons. And the only conclusion is it's always forbidden because God said so. Right? On a moral issue, we dealt with it on other issues also, but we hit a moral issue. Right? So what are your definitions? What's your definition of good? Right? That definition of good cannot change. Right? Torah is not relative over here. Doesn't change throughout the generations. So what is goodness? You might think this is good. Person will say, you know what? I have an all-cash business. I declare what I want. Well, that's beautiful. That's stealing from the government. You're going to say, why do I have to declare it? They're already taking 33%. I don't want to give them any more. Right? So now, technically, if they have an all-cash business, right? They have an all-cash business. What do they declare? They declare whatever they want. Now, obviously, if they're living a fancy life, the IRS is going to track them down and say you must be getting money from somewhere else, right? You're hiding money, which here in Israel they audit people every so often because they know they're hiding money because they don't make as much money and the taxes are high, right? That's what people are going to do it anyway. But someone's going to justify it, and someone's going to say I have a right to do this. That's not the question. The question is, according to the law, no legal loopholes over here. Right? No third and longs, no CFL. There are no loopholes there. Bottom line is, yes or no. Don't give me a maybe. There's a multiple choice, yes or no. Is that permissible to do? And what's the answer? No. It's a Torah prohibition of stealing. You have to go according to the law of the land. If it's a legal loophole, that's okay, right? Because that's legal. If it's not legal, it doesn't matter what your justification is. It's wrong, right? 100% it's wrong. Yeah, question.
About legal loopholes. I find that it takes a weak character to search for them. There are those that do nothing but try to discover new loopholes and find ways around. And isn't there what to be said about those that function that way? As far as ethically, I find them immoral in the sense that they're always looking to skirt the status quo, and they actually drag down.
So that might be that. You might be right. That may be a ethical issue. That might be an ethical issue whether I'm allowed to do it or not. But the question is, if it's legal, it's legal. It's on the books. If it's on the books and it applies to me, why can't I use it? So you tell me, but it's not ethical. It's not ethical. Why isn't it ethical? Because you're trying to circumvent something, right? Now, I could easily say that really doesn't play in, that really is not an issue here. Why is it not an issue? Because if it's legal, who says I have to go? I have to live beyond the letter of the law. Who says I have to go so far and worry about that? Because ethically speaking, maybe it's not the best thing to do. Maybe.
Well, certain things erode away at.
It depends what you do. If you're using all these legal loopholes, you don't have to pay anything in taxes, and you figure out a way to do that. Maybe that's true, right? That'll get rid of the letter of the law, right? Even the spirit of the law, right? For sure. But kind of like I guess you have super mega wealthy people, and taxes they're paying.
They start paying lawyers to
they're paying
develop think tanks to get around things.
Right, they're paying a tiny amount, comparatively speaking, because of other things. Now, who says that's fair? Nobody says that's fair. Why should that be fair? Let them be taxed as much as they should be taxed. Now, again, they can put things in trusts. They can put things in different people's names. etc. There are legal ways to do it. I'm not saying you have to be a martyr and say, okay, I'm going to pay 90% tax. Not make any money. It is legal to do that, right? I mean, it does raise an interesting question, when it comes to, let's say, inheritance law, right? Inheritance law, what happened? Let's say a person got a lot of property, a lot of money. And what do? So years before they die, they put it in a trust, right? That's what most people would probably do. They put it in a trust. Why do they put it in a trust? Less tax liability. So you're going to say, but wait a minute, don't they have an obligation? Don't they have an obligation according to the letter of the law? Now, who says I have to be a martyr over here? Who says 60% of that should go to taxes? I want to give that to my kids, to my grandkids. I don't want to get eaten up. So I put it in
trust.
I do it this way, right? I set it up that way as a trust. Now, is anyone out there going to say setting something up in a trust is illegal? It's not illegal. Not at all. Why is it not illegal? Perfectly legal. Right? You can do that. The question is, in the spirit of the law, does it transgress the spirit of the law? And the answer is it doesn't, because I have a right to do whatever I want with my money.
Inequality would claim that it makes unequal weights and measures for different classes of people.
No, that's another issue. But I'm just arguing the point that when it comes to something, let's say like this, you put things in trust. Technically, you could tell me it's an ethical issue, because the reality is, why put it in trust, right? You got to pay taxes anyway, so you pay taxes, right? Your kids will still get, they just won't get as much, right? So the question is, who says I have to do that? Instead of having a 30% liability, let's say now I have a 6% liability. That's a heck of a lot different, right? More money to be spread. Now, someone may say that's an ethical issue. Why? Why is that an ethical issue?
Well, others may call it a wise move too, right?
That's what I'm saying. In other words, who says, I have to do everything that the IRS wants me to, that the tax authorities want me to, in order I should pay, the most taxes. If I can save money paying taxes, right? So why should I do that? Right? I have more, I can write this off, write that off, write other things off. Why shouldn't I do that? Right? Then you'd be a fool for not doing that. Right? Because then you have less liability. You have less, less to pay. But there is that question you could ask. That why is that not an ethical imperative? It should be maybe you'll tell me it's an ethical imperative. That, a person shouldn't take his money. They shouldn't take their money and put it in trust. What do some people do? We'll just flush this out a little bit more. Let's say someone's got a
doesn't one way encourage a forked tongue?
No, I'll tell you why. I mean, in some ways, maybe. In some ways, but the point I wanted to make was, let's say a parent gets older. Now, in order, they want, I don't know, Medicaid or other things to, let's say, cover. Doesn't always work this way, and usually doesn't work this way, but let's say they put them in a nursing home. Nursing home costs a fortune. Right? Now, what's the first thing a nursing home is going to want to do? Assets. They want to acquire assets. So what is a wise son or daughter going to do? They're going to take the property of the parent and put it in someone else's name. Right? That's the first thing they're going to do. They put it in their name, put it in their kid's name. They'll put it in someone else's name. Why? So the nursing home has no access to it. Right? So they, obviously they want to be able to qualify, not have to pay an arm and a leg. Now, I would venture to guess. My guess would be probably a lot of people do this. It's probably a very common thing to get out of paying a huge amount. Now, again, we could ask a lot of these questions. We could ask the same question in all these cases. Isn't that an ethical issue?
Offshore
accounts
and stuff.
Right. So says Dan, the man over here. So isn't that going to teach you? Isn't that going to teach you how to do things illegally? So one of the rabbis, and Tom would ask that question. In other words, if a person learns the laws of damages, and they have to learn what other charlatans are going to say, doesn't that mean I could also be a charlatan? I could also be a fake, and I could also try and scam people? Right? The obvious answer is, yeah, that could happen, but you know what? It makes you wiser. It makes you understand things better. So you want to tell me, okay, maybe there's a 5% chance. Maybe there's a 5% chance when a person learns all this, they're going to come out with a forked tongue. They're going to do things illegally. They're going to find loopholes, in different things. Is that a possibility? Could be. Is it something that I'm going to shy away from because of it? No. Right? Because the majority of time, that's not going to happen. Right? It's certainly not going to. Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen it erode people's characters. Like I spent 25 years in the auto industry, and I did very well. And all I can say is
people in the auto industry, in general. I'm not saying you, and you probably know this better, than anyone else. People in the auto industry, you never believe a word they say, because all they want to do is make money and sell a car, right? In general, right? Someone once told me, he said on a Sunday morning, you hear these evangelicals speak, you turn off the sound. He says they sound like used car salesmen. So wow. I don't know if it's true, how much is true or not, but in general, it's
my point being is that we got to notice people who got the bug, and they were so used to negotiating that you couldn't have interaction with them without them trying to get the better or upper hand in any scenario. You couldn't go out for dinner with them as a couple because they're going to argue with you over the bill to the point where they're always looking for the upper hand, and it just erodes at the moral fiber.
I mean, I saw this in real estate. I was in between person between buyer and seller. And the buyer, a lot of times would not sign a non-disclosure. Right? Sometimes they wouldn't sign a non-disclosure. Why? I could say, why should I sign it? I said, because I want to guarantee I'm going to get paid. Right? Even if the non-disclosure, doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. It's building trust. Right? So you're sitting there negotiating with the seller. You know what the seller's bottom line is, so to speak. Obviously try and get them, the best deal, et cetera. And the buyer, what does the buyer want? The buyer wants to make the most profit, and they don't want to have to pay you. Right, they don't have to pay you as much. So I had people tell me, what, you don't trust me? It has nothing to do with trust, sign it. Right, and I got messed over in a deal, it wasn't a huge deal, right, but yeah, someone got greedy. And said, yeah, I agreed. That's what they said, that's what I told the title agent. I agreed to take a certain cut to make the deal go through. Right, almost half of what I would have made. And because it was a holiday, they couldn't contact me, and the deal went through, and that's what happened. Right? So it was better getting something, obviously, than nothing. Right? But there's a lot of greed. And the argument I would always make is, you don't want to sign, why should I sign, or why should I pay this? Because you wouldn't have got the deal without me. Right? So you want to find your own deals, go find your own deals. I found this deal. I deserve to be paid, no matter how much time I put in it. Right? They deserve to be paid. What do people want to do? They want to screw you over. Right? They want to screw you over because they want to make more profit. They want to make more profit margin.
Yeah, but there's something unethical about it rather than...
It's totally unethical. And I got really
if it's not illegal, it's fine?
I got burnt out being in real estate, and I thought it was just real estate. But it's plenty of other things also.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's other things in business.
It can crush your moral fiber for sure.
No, 100%. And what I heard people say, and most of the people, thank God I work with, weren't Jews. But still, the unethical ideas of what people wanted to do, et cetera, just to circumvent, other people. It doesn't matter how much time they put in. I took this mentorship program with somebody. And, one of the things he says, when it comes to money, forget about trying to hide it in an LLC or make another LLC or do this. If you're making money, you pay the taxes. Right? Now, I don't think he was such a religious guy. Right? But this was this is the message I got. This is a non-Jew telling you, be ethical, because why do you want to start up? I'm not saying anyone, a person is necessarily going to get caught, and they're going to get caught by the law. That could happen. Right? We're not talking, we're not necessarily talking about that. The question is, should a person be actively like that? And I spoke to so many different people, that were involved, dealing with buyers. They all said the same thing. You got to get people that you trust, right? And it's hard to find people that you trust.
Oh, and,
You know,
and
so
the
again,
less ethical they are,
it could be in sales, it could be, in cars, it could be in real estate, it could be other things. Bottom line is people want to make money off of other people, and they don't want to have to pay them, right? They don't have to pay them what they deserve, and they're unethical. So this gets to the heart of this whole thing. So you never know where this goes. This gets to the heart of everything because that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about ethics, right? Now, a lot of these things, are going to be Torah prohibitions, right? A person, in this deal I got messed up on, right? This non-Jew signs an agreement. He signed an agreement that says you're going to get paid X, right? Now, if you hold that has any weight, right? If it has any weight, we do, right? Certainly in Judaism it has weight, even necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have witnesses, right? It doesn't necessarily have to have witnesses. In many cases it does, but it doesn't really matter, right? The point is you signed something. You gave your word. You said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So then what happens? They circumvent you. You end up making less, so to speak, and they lied, right? They totally lied. Doesn't the Torah tell me I'm not allowed to lie? So what happened to ethics over here? Ethics went out the window because they want to make more money. Now, God doesn't really care. The person's struggling, didn't make any money this month. He's going to make more money because, I'm going to make less money. The excuse, and this is what we said before. So again, you never know how all these things tie together. Torah's all one big thing, right? And you can't make excuses. You absolutely cannot make excuses and justify it if it's totally not justifiable. So I told the title company, I said, I understand. The deal had to close exactly on that day. You couldn't wait. Couldn't wait another 5-6 hours, another day just to get my opinion. So obviously, I was meant to lose that money, right? That's the Torah outlook. Okay, I got messed up for whatever reason, and I was supposed to lose the money, right? I could have used that money also, no question. But okay, so you try and be more careful in the future. No guarantee. There's no guarantee. So what happened? People being on the up and up. Then what happened to ethics over here? If ethics is not absolute, and the Torah is not absolute, ethics vary. If ethics vary, and this is very easy to prove. Very easy way to prove it is you go back 60, 70 years, 80 years, right? We weren't living in necessarily Victorian English, just people didn't know what was going on, right? Behind closed doors. Today, you know everything about everything in a split second. So my parents' generation, go back 80 years, more than 80 years, in their generation, certain things were unheard of. Unheard of. And today, these things are mitzvahs. These things are obvious. The LGBT community, tremendous amount of power today. Back then, there was a reason why they said they stayed in the closet.
No, it was illegal in my country.
There's a reason.
Yeah, it was
right?
actually, it was a crime.
It wasn't right
when I was young, yeah.
Right? But it wasn't accepted. It's wrong. All of a sudden, what made it right? Not only what made it right, I mentioned in my Q&A on Thursday about this movie Unorthodox. It's one thing you got issues with the religious community, different things. It's a whole nother thing. You're making an expose on things that aren't necessarily true. You might have seen things a certain way, etc. And that's what everyone wants to see because there are hundreds, thousands of Orthodox women, putting out comments in different places saying we're happy. We don't feel oppressed. We don't feel, these other things. I get it. Maybe she had a bad experience, different things. But you go prancing around, and expose it just like you have these parades. You have these parades and people flaunting, this tremendous transgression. Right? So there is a silver lining. As I mentioned, how can you see a silver lining over here? This act is called an abomination. How can it be a silver lining over here? There's a silver lining because it's one of the 15 signs that we're living in the Messianic era. Absolute chutzpah. This isn't, you imagine someone who's a thief, someone who's a murderer. All of a sudden they start having, parades, bragging about all their escapades. They start saying, oh yeah, I killed this one. I killed that one. I did the other thing. Why this of all things? So it's very simple, because the way the world is going today, they're saying there's nothing wrong with anything. I can do what I want. Not only can I do what I want.
Well, this is why I was trying to bring up the moral fiber.
I can express it any way I want, right? But this is not something, that's the norm. They want to claim it's the norm. They want 6, 7-year-olds reading books that Johnny has 2 fathers, or, Amy has 2 mothers, or whatever, and make that the norm. I mean, when I was growing up, come on, biggest thing is that you had a kid my age, my grade was like wearing an earring. That was a huge thing. Okay, kids were doing drugs, and other things, whatever it was. Maybe someone had a rat tail, had like a ponytail, whatever. That was a huge thing. Anyone who got tattoos, they were considered like low class.
You remember the dawn of punk rock, where they were
also, yeah,
colored spikes,
people getting
and all
mohawks,
kinds of
other things, right? So it got progressively worse. Definitely, again, most people today have tattoos, right? A lot of people got tattoos for whatever reason, right? That wasn't something, thank God, I would have had a desire for. But
got popular in the 80s.
But when I was growing up, way back when, because we're a similar age, right? Way back when, who got tattoos? Who got tattoos?
Bikers and sailors,
Low-class people got tattoos.
Yeah.
That's who got tattoos. Today, you got little kids get tattoos, right? So what changed? What changed over here? That all of a sudden, that things were brushed under the carpet, even if it was going on, doesn't matter. But the fact that it was kept closed, and even in some places totally illegal, as you mentioned, right? 100%. Now you go into the opposite extreme. Yes. Now you're going to say, not only is it permissible, but I'm going to flaunt it. Not only am I going to flaunt it, I'm going to make it such a powerful group, and if you don't hold by it, you're homophobic, and you're this, and you're, and you're all kinds of other things. So I would say, okay, you want to do what you want to do. Why in the world do you have to ram it down my throat? Why do you have to ram it down the throat of everybody in the world? Right? That's the complaint over here. Not to mention what this person's doing.
Chutzpah.
Making this whole expose when a lot of things she's saying isn't true anyway. In general. But she's making a lot of money doing this. Man, dog bites man, nobody cares. Man bites dog, this is a story. So what about all the thousands of women that are happy? Does that make any news? Not going to make any news. Anybody going to care? Nobody's going to care. Right? I remember someone I went to camp with many years ago. So they sent me, they said, oh, did you ever read this book? It's a book about someone also. Someone wrote a book, they went off and they wrote this book of how, how controlling and different things, the Orthodox community, blah, 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 blah. So I just saw like a little excerpt of, what it was about. So I wrote back and I said, no, this is something I don't, I wouldn't even read in the bathroom. Why not? Because I don't have any issues. I don't have any major issues. I believe the Torah is true. I'm not saying, that we're doing everything the way we should, by any stretch. But, this is what it is. Sometimes it works better, sometimes not. But this is it. This is what the system is. So, if that's the case, and 95% are not opting out, you only have a small percentage. Okay, I'm not saying it can't happen. There are different reasons. There are a number of different reasons it's irrelevant for this discussion, right? But the point is you got to say, well, person's upset, what they went through, so they want to make this whole expose. Well, what does that help? That would help psychologically. This is helping this person make money. Yeah, but what does it help over here? Did you try and get help? Did you try and speak to people? Or you just said, I want to take the shackles off. I just want to live the life I want to do. I don't want to have repercussions. And this is exactly the point. I don't want to be told what to do, right? That's, we'll see in future shows. We'll see where, my discussion goes with certain people. But this is what they're going to say. I mean, I have something I have to answer them. I answer, later or tomorrow. But the whole point is they don't want to be told what they do is wrong, right? They don't want to be obligated in anything, and that's most people. But that in no way answers the question. My question that I threw out there was, did God give the Jewish people the Torah? Yes or no? And if he
Yes.
did, what are my obligations? Now, what's the person? Now, what most likely is the person going to throw back? They're going to throw back, I'm a good person. That doesn't matter. That's what they're going to throw back.
Irrelevant.
And again, if you're telling me you're good, what's your definition of good? What's the Torah's definition of good? Well, I don't care what the Torah definition is, but you're not answering the question, right? See, this is one of my pet peeves. You're not in. I mean, I shouldn't even be wasting my time with this, but the question is, answer it. Just answer the question. Don't tell me, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and I don't care about anything else. I have a right to do. I'm going to be this cardiac Jew. I'm going to do whatever I want. That's beautiful. That doesn't answer the question. I asked a specific question. You don't believe it's true? Tell me why. Show me. Now, it's irrelevant to my life. Okay, I could give you 10 reasons why it is relevant. You want to hear them? No. You can't argue with such a person, right? It's a waste of time. But I want an answer. I want these secular people to answer. But why can't they give an answer? Because if they get now in my head, and they're going to say, oh, maybe the Torah is true. Maybe there are arguments that are actually true. Now, if that's the case, then that means what I do is wrong. I'm going to have to answer. I have to change my life. Oh, what if I'm intermarried? What if my spouse is not going to think the same way? They're not open-minded. They're very far from being open-minded, right? They'll claim I'm the biggest fanatic in the world. Okay, I don't claim to be open-minded, right? That's not my claim. My claim is the Torah is true, and I have plenty of evidence to show it. Oh, I don't believe that. Or like someone told me, a number of weeks back, I've been intermarried 35 years. I'm not worried anything's going to happen to me. Nothing's happened till this point. I'm certainly not worried about the next world, right? So what's my answer to that? What's my very simple answer? Okay, you studied ancient philosophy. Socrates, Aristotle. No. You studied more modern philosophy. Kant, Kierkegaard. No. If you ever studied Jewish philosophy, right? We'll make a big difference here. Jewish philosophy. The Rambam, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, right? Who wrote the Kuzari? No. Have you read the Bible from cover to cover? No, but I saw the movie. So what's the obvious answer? You're not an atheist. You're an idiot, right? Obviously not going to call them an idiot. But they've never learned. They've never studied, right? And they're telling you, they're telling you pretty definitively, oh, I don't believe that. You got evidence? I don't need evidence. I don't believe it.
Yeah.
That's not a debating argument.
Live in their own world.
Right? Yeah. It's not
rose-colored glasses.
You want to get the truth. That's not the argument. Right? They're just pushing you off and say, oh, it doesn't have relevance, this, that. Right? I'm a good person. But what in the world does that mean? And you could be, so one of the things I mentioned earlier in this chat is the fact that it's 60% intermarriage. Right? If it's 60% intermarriage, then Judaism can't survive. Right? Judaism, these people will die out. You only have a small percentage left. But they're dying out. So, in your own group, 60%, 70%. But I'm a good person. It's a relevant argument. It's a relevant argument. So you're going to say again, why waste your time? It's a good question. Right? But people have to understand, you want to tell me something is good or they believe in X and it goes against the Torah, show me why it's true. Show me why the Torah is not true. If you can prove the Torah is not true, and I would definitely agree, that if you could prove that, then there's no point to keep mitzvahs. There's no point to keep Torah. No point to keep anything. I'll do whatever I want.
Honest about it.
Right? But most people are not intellectually honest. Most people don't care.
With themselves, yeah.
Because if they're intellectually honest, then they're going to, I got into someone's head once about what the definition of good is. And that person got so upset, I got into their head. I made them start answering difficult questions. They started to squirm and say, I don't know how we got to this conversation. I'm stopping it right now. Wow. I'm stopping it right now. Right? This person, not a stupid person. Person's got an MBA, very bright person. But what do they understand? They understand if we take this conversation further, there could be evidence or there could be information that they can't answer. And not only that, they're going to see their life as a travesty of mockery of Hashem. And that no one wants to deal with. Right? So they'll take fantasy. They'll live fantasy, and that's it. But, this comes up more and more and more, and it's just, I just put this out there because, one of the things, as we're ending here, what we're talking about ethics, right? Ethics have a foundation. The foundation we saw, I'm sure you played it many times on the Roku network, right? Mishnah 1, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Where do ethics come from? Moshe, God gave this to Moshe. Moshe passed it down to Joshua. Joshua passed it down to the men of the Great Assembly. Men of the Great Assembly passed it down to the elders. Elders passed it down, to the different people. And that's what we're in the middle of now. But where is the source? That's the point. Where is the source of all ethics? The source of all ethics is
Hashem.
Is the Torah itself. That's where it comes from.
Well,
now,
you had brought up a question of holiness earlier as well.
Yeah, but that's where it stems from. But they're going to, what is a secular person going to argue? Who cares about the Torah? My holiness depends on what I do and what I think. Okay,
And
based on.
Think, yeah.
I mean, all it takes is one or two questions and they're stuck, right? What is it based on? It's based on what I think, based on what I do, But okay, now I got a contradiction because now you're doing this, but now you're saying that this is okay, but you said before it's not. Now I changed my mind. Why'd you change your mind? I mean, you start asking questions, you turn them into a pretzel, right? And it's not a hard thing to do because most people do not have clear thoughts about anything, right? It's not like they've ever thought anything about ethics, Jewish ethics, the Torah means anything, doesn't mean anything. What are they thinking about? Whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
They're thinking about
their
desire.
Yeah.
Right. They're thinking about their own desires. They're thinking about everything they want to do or not do, or whatever the case is, and they'll justify it however they do it. Right? But they and this is what we spoke about before. The whole thing is they want to justify what they do. And they definitely don't want to hear you, me, or anyone else, especially me, say that there are repercussions for their actions. Nobody wants to hear that. Right? And I do understand. Right? But I would say that people make all kinds of claims. They say things very definitively. And I would say, just tell me I have doubts, I'm not sure, etc. I'll get off your back. I'll cut you a lot of slack. But you tell me that this is definitive, I know for a fact, or I don't believe it, you have to show the proof. You have to show why. And most likely, what's the person going to say? I don't have to show you anything. That's what I feel. Now, that doesn't delegitimize me at all. It doesn't answer the question. Because they're going to keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. Right? But that does not butter the biscuit over here. So you want to get into somewhat of a debate, or you want to defend your position, defend it. If you're not going to defend your position, then I don't have to take what you say seriously at all. Because it doesn't matter what's in your heart.
Oh.
I could care less what is in your cardiac Jewish or not Jewish heart. It's irrelevant. Bring me facts. I would say, as you would probably agree, you got to put up or shut up. If you're not going to shut up, then I want information.
Be real or
give me the information. You don't want to give me the information. You want to just say, I'm a hedonist. I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't care what the Torah says. It's irrelevant. Okay? Right? You could absolutely make that argument. That has nothing to do with whether the Torah is true or not. Right? And someone will say, that's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. Right? We're going to tell me life's irrelevant. The Torah is inclusive of everything we do. Every last thing we do, all our thoughts. Right? Oh, I don't believe that. Really? You don't believe that. You don't believe God knows the thoughts of men. Well, what's the Bible say? No, I don't hold by the Bible. Really? Why not? No, there are all these old stories, whatever. Well, don't you think maybe it could be proven? Different ways it could be proven? No, I don't believe that. You want to see the proofs? No. So I get all these Christians, what's the last thing they'll do before they finally come out of Christianity? Maybe they'll look at, what Rabbi Singer says. Rabbi Skobach, what they say. But that's the last line of defense. Because if they knock them out, it's over. It's over. Right? They knocked them out. Someone tell me this. They watched some of Rabbi Singer's videos. They watched a whole bunch of his videos, like they OD'd on some of his videos. After like a couple hours, they're like, I'm done with Christianity. This person had studied and studied and studied all these different things about Christianity. They were out in 3 hours. Less than 3 hours. Why? Because they wanted truth. They wanted truth. But this is the last stand. Because someone's going to say, come on, you think the church's been lying to me for all these years? Yes. You want to see the evidence? No. I don't need to see the evidence. I know this is true. If you really believe it's true, right? We'll end with this. right? If you believe what you say is true, all you have to do is bring your own evidence. Bring your own evidence why it's true, right? That's what I would say. If you don't have evidence, then you can't say it's true. You say, I believe I have to have faith. Well, I got contradictions up the gazoo. Many, many contradictions. How do you answer this? Doesn't matter. I have faith. I got to pray on it. How many people have I heard tell me that? I have to pray on it. Keep praying. Keep praying. Go ahead. What's it going to get you? Goose egg.
Don't.
Yeah, so obviously, I didn't even get to the last part of the Mishnah.
Oh, does that mean there's a part 15 next week?
Yeah, it's going to be a part 15, but it's not going to be next week. Next week, we're just going to give a little preview here. I'm going up north on Thursday, and we're having a planning meeting for this community up north. And, hopefully, I would say the week after that, actually I have a wedding and something else. So probably within 2 weeks, hopefully we're going to have some learning at some capacity, up there at some level. We'll see. We're still trying to work out, some of the details. And then, then the goal is to try and build it. But this is, whatever. This is something actually I'm very excited about and, ready to sink my teeth in. And, hopefully, next week, the end of next week, through Shabbos and after Shabbos, we're going to have a good, hopefully we'll have, good vibes up there and see where it goes. Could be, after the show, maybe we could try and figure out maybe a different day to do it, or we'll do it in 2 weeks. Either way, we'll see what works out.
So we're not on for next week, is what you're telling me.
No, I won't be around.
Well, I know this is something you've been on your heart for a lot of years, and I just encourage everybody, support Rabbi Coffman. You can go to his website, orthodoxconversion.com.
Or on Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism.
On Facebook, I know you're working at some great stuff there in the land of Israel, and we pray that Hashem just help you flourish into your potential. I mean, you've been sharing and giving so much out to B'nai Noach and in the nations out there. We pray that your heart is full with all that you desire to serve Hashem in, and we know that it'll have Hashem honoring intent, and we thank you for all that you share with us. So we will be having a part 15 to this chapter 2, Mishnah 6. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks. We'll keep you posted, folks, but thanks again, Rabbi, for today. So we're going to sign off for today. I got Rabbi Poston coming up in about 25 minutes with Beyond the 7, part 30 of the 48 Ways to Wisdom. You're welcome to stick around. But we're going to sign off for now. So have a wonderful, wonderful day, folks.
The Hebrew nation, first of all, is speaking about a God who is from outside the world, who created this world, who spoke with us. And this is a different era between us, and today we also know that the Christian and the Muslims, that they took it from the Hebrew nation, right. And all sorts of other, I will say, nations that were not connected to the Hebrew nation, who spoke about all sorts of aliens, all sorts of other things that are very far and very not related to us. Now, the Hebrew nation, when we are speaking about those issues, we are speaking about things that we saw in our eyes, we felt, we were part of this history, and therefore we can get related to this issue and manage to go on, to continue on, I will say, to pass it on to generation after generation. And as I said before, today we're also closing the circle by going back to the homeland, to our homeland,
yes, from
all the diaspora, and rebuilding back the Hebrew nation, the Israel land, and we can continue with this issue. And I think this is a great stop for this. I will say for tonight. For one moment. I don't think that I brought it to you before, But the next question that will be that the Khazarian will ask, and this is only an opening for the next week, is if we say so, the Bible is only